Hello, everyone. Welcome to the conversation with Libertarian Rants. We're going to be talking about libertarianism. So, first question, Libertarian Rants. Why are you a libertarian? Like, where did you start?
Okay, yeah. I think when I was like a little kid, I remember asking my dad what the difference was between Republicans and Democrats. At the time, I had no idea what they were. Obviously, I was probably like 8 years old, and I remember him telling me like how you would explain it to a young kid, like Democrats will take more of your money, but they're going to offer you services if you need them. Republicans will let you keep more of your money through taxation. They'll let you keep more of your money, but if you ever get sick or if you ever need anything, they're not going to offer that much to you. And now that was like a real basic, obviously, a very, very basic level thing that you would tell a little kid. Um, and So I remember immediately gravitating towards the Republican side of thing. I just kind of felt like, oh, yeah, I would rather have my own money and do my own thing. Not knowing anything about politics whatsoever, I just immediately gravitated towards that side. And he was really good. Like I never even knew what he was politically. He never really talked about it until later on in life. And then so I became a really staunch conservative Republican. Like I was a 2004 George Bush supporting Republican, America, hell yeah, that whole thing. And I think I went to Congress. I forget how old I was, 17 or 18, something like that. I remember going to Congress and there was this little subcommittee talking, and I was watching them speak. And I remember seeing some Republicans argue for increasing taxation on some small businesses. And I just remember that kind of just planted a little seed. It wasn't like that day I became a libertarian, but I remember seeing that and thinking, well, this is weird. Isn't this the whole antithesis of being a Republican? I thought you were supposed to be for small government. And here are some Republicans advocating for taxing small businesses more, arguably the group of people who need taxes the least, or who need to be taxed the least. Obviously, everyone should be taxed less, but small businesses struggle. And I just remember that kind of opened my eyes a little bit to like these Republicans are not really very, very sincere in what they believe. And so after that happened, I didn't become a libertarian right away, but I started to not be so, I guess, immediate in my support of a Republican. If I was watching C-SPAN and I saw an R next to somebody's name, I used to be just like, oh, hell yeah, I probably agree with 100% of the things this person says. And after that, I started questioning it more. It was more of let me be objective. Let me hear what this person has to say. And then I think I probably share a lot of similarities with many libertarians in that Ron Paul was certainly one of the first persons who I heard speak where I was like, this person is saying the things that I wanted to hear back when I was a Republican. Where was this person? And I remember always hearing about how Ron Paul was just this nutcase. He was crazy, all this stuff. And then I would just sit down and watch his speeches and listen to what he would say and read his books. And I would say, my God, this is the person I was looking for. Like, this is perfect. And then from there, I can't give you an exact timeline, but, then I would get into Henry Hazlitt. He wrote Economics in One Lesson, F.A. Hayek, Rothbard, von Mises, all that stuff. And from there, I remember I was probably, 21, 22, where I remember making the decision, like, officially, like, I am not a Republican anymore. I'm a libertarian. Republicans are ridiculous now. I can't trust any of them, and none of them are sincere. And they're far too hypocritical for my taste. So, and that's kind of my story in a nutshell, pretty much.
Yeah, that's interesting that, it seems like with me as well, and a lot of people that where they're Republicans, and it's not necessarily that they change their views when they become libertarian. It's that they're like, okay, turns out libertarians are what I wanted all along. Like how you described it earlier on, or how I should say your dad described it earlier on, of like Republicans want less taxes, Democrats want more taxes. Like that's slightly true, and it's like there's on the very, very surface, it has like a little bit of a truth to it. But then it's like when you actually hear libertarians talk, it's like, oh, this is what I wanted all along. Like, this is really what I thought Republicans were. And then I assume over time, like with me, it's like, okay, as every time a Republican does something that's actually that they actually want to raise your taxes, or they say, oh, maybe we'll do this thing that increases growth of government. It's like, oh, I'm going to take a little bit of a step back from that. And then with libertarians, they're overall pretty consistent. So it's like, oh, this is where I belong.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, as far as Republicans being small government, it's one of those weird things, because I remember being a Republican and making a lot of excuses for, like, yeah, you're supposed to be for small government. And then people would come to me who were, your typical liberal Democrat, whatever, and say, well, yeah, did you know that George Bush, and did you know that Reagan, they increased the size of government and all that stuff? And I didn't really know much about it, but I would just write it off. Come to find that, yeah, in many areas they did, but I would just kind of let it slide. It was just like, I'm supposed to love these people. I'm supposed to revere them so they can do no wrong. And then, later on, I kind of had to be honest with myself and say, well, is that really what I want to, is that who I want to throw my lot in with? Do I want to be with these people? And, the other glaring thing was the military. I mean, we spend an ungodly amount on the military, and that's a huge, gigantic government program. There's no way of getting around that. And if you're going to claim to be small government, then you can't be for an absolutely gargantuan military. It's just one of those things.
Yeah, and it's interesting how, like, when it comes to libertarians, like, I can at least trace it all back. The argument all tends to stem from one single argument of, like, maximum freedom, of property rights and all that. It's like, okay, if we start with, and this is what I like so much about libertarians, where their argument is moral. Like, they start from the beginning, kind of. They're like, okay, let's take the moral argument of property rights and, like, individual choice and whatever, and then pretty much every position from then on is kind of just an extension of that. So it's like, I don't even have to ask what's the position on this. I can just say, okay, I can figure it out based on the principles. Whereas it seems with Republicans, there's a pretty solid line of, like, okay, we're for this, but in this situation, we're actually for this. Like you said, if we're for small government, except when it comes to the military, except for this. And what Medicare Part D was George Bush's idea. And when it comes to those things, it's like, it is hard to defend. Like, you can't be like, oh, I'm the party of small, or I'm the group of that supports small government. And then it's like, well, if you look in our past, it doesn't seem to be true. And it's like, it gets harder and harder to defend that until you're eventually like, okay, I can't.
Yeah, and honestly, I think you made a really good point. It's that there's a basis in a philosophy rather than a crapshoot, or moving to the political winds of the day, which is what Republicans and Democrats do to the point of nausea, because. Like, for example, I was actually thinking about this even in my recent video with the Ludwig von Mises thing, because there were a lot of people criticizing him for being a fascist, which is absurd. I mean, we could talk at length about that if you want. But one of the things I was thinking of, and I don't think I mentioned this in the video, but one thing I was thinking of was the fact where, let's say, hypothetically, von Mises was a fascist. Let's say, hypothetically, he was. It kind of wouldn't matter. No, it wouldn't matter at all, because he's not dealing with revealed wisdom. He's not dealing with divine inspiration or anything like that. He's dealing with logic and reasoning and critical thinking. And therefore, it doesn't matter if it was von Mises who said and wrote what he did, if it was me or you. It doesn't matter, because there's an inherent truth that can be found in what he wrote. There's nothing... it doesn't matter who he is. It just matters what was said. In the same way, I would say to a communist, let's say I wrote a book about communism and it blew everyone away and it made communism just look like the pie in the sky that everybody's been waiting for. If you found out that I, after writing this book, made a bunch of money and exploited a bunch of workers, would that discount what I wrote on communism? Would that make people say, okay, the inherent truth of what he wrote is no longer an inherent truth? right? That would not make any sense, besides communism not being an inherent truth. I'm just using that as an example.
Right.
And I was thinking of that because it's mostly communists and socialists who levy that criticism to von Mises for being a fascist. And it's like, well, first of all, I know he wasn't. And secondly, hypothetically, even if he was, is that all you have to say about him? You can't actually go into what his logic and his critical thought and defeat it from there. They have to throw these ridiculous names around to get anywhere because, they deal in a defunct ideology of socialism. But yeah,
it's like it's just character assassination. It's like, okay, what we're dealing with right now, like when it comes to like Ludwig von Mises, it's like I like him it's not that I necessarily support him. It's like I like his ideas. I like what he has written down, the arguments he's proposed. And like you said, it's like that's what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with his arguments. We're dealing with what he has written down and that he's claiming. We're not necessarily dealing of him as a human being. It's like it does not disprove the arguments of what he wrote down to talk about him. It's like,
right. I think you're right. In fact, I think there's many people who have said there's some differing views on this, but there's some people who said that not in his personal life, but he was a very rough person in a sense. Like he didn't hold back. He had no kind of soft edges to him at all. And so when I hear that, I think to myself, you know what? If I knew him personally, it could very well be the case that I wouldn't like him personally. That could very well be true. I wouldn't want to have a beer with him, as many people say. Maybe that's true, but again, as you said, it doesn't take away the actual logic of what he said. I might hate Albert Einstein. I don't know why I would, but I can't. By hating Albert Einstein, I can't say that energy doesn't equal mass times the speed of light squared. Right? It doesn't make any sense.
Right, and actually, that makes me think of take from my perspective at least objectivism versus Ayn Rand. Like I have two very different opinions on like objectivism, the philosophy, which I mean I'm not an objectivist, but I think it has some good, or it's definitely well thought out in many aspects. But then Ayn Rand as a person, it's like, well, maybe not so much, but people seem to like. It seems that whenever I first got into objectivism, when I started reading that stuff, it's like all people had was just, well, Ayn Rand is this and this and this, and she said that and this, and it's like, well, I don't really care. I care about like what her philosophy is. Like that doesn't counteract it, because I'd bring up a point like, well, she made a point here, and they'd be like, oh, well, she did this on a Tuesday at one time. It's like that doesn't matter. And actually, that was what got me into her in the first place, because that was my first intro into politics. Actually, was like. I mentioned this before in some other video, I'll find it, but I had gotten a Skype account, and all of my friends were like, hey, get Skype, so I finally did, and they were talking, and for some reason the topic got to Ayn Rand, and they started bashing her, and it was like, well, I know people that like Ayn Rand, and I like them, therefore I must defend her, and I knew nothing because I never read her stuff. And it was like, okay, well, I guess I have to read her stuff now, so I started doing it, and it's like, From then on, once I got into her stuff, then I got into, like, Ron Paul, and then I went from, like, objectivist to full-blown libertarian. I kind of crossed over like that, but it was like, yeah, these people are attacking the person and they're not attacking the philosophy. It's like all that does is make me think, okay, you've got nothing else. It's like if you had an argument against a philosophy or a counter argument to an argument, you would use that. You wouldn't jump right to character assassination.
Yeah, exactly. I often find that ad hominem attacks are the first thing that a lot of people go to when they don't really have anything else to use in a debate or a conversation. The same thing is done with Murray Rothbard. Murray Rothbard had some ties to a racist. I forget exactly who it was. It was a governor, I think, or something along the lines. He actually supported this governor, according to the limited amount of research that I did into this. I read into it once, and it seemed as if he did do that. Now, would I agree with that? Absolutely not. But when you're having a conversation about what Murray Rothbard actually wrote, it doesn't do the other side any good to say, well, he was a racist, so period. It's like, well, okay, well, there are actually arguments and logic here that you need to refute. You don't have to refute that one time he supported somebody who wasn't a good person. which we could agree with. If he really did support that person, some racist from the South, yeah, we could agree. And the conversation will be 2 seconds later. That was a bad move. I don't know why he did it. It was a bad move, period. What else is there to say?
Yeah, exactly. It's like the same thing with Ron Paul being accused of writing racist things in that newsletter, like, I don't know, what was it, 20 years ago or something. It's like, when I was first, like, really getting into Ron Paul, which was, or not too long after the election, where it didn't, I remember, like, people always bringing up that thing of, like, oh, he's a racist because he wrote this thing 20 years ago, and it's like, I don't really care. Like, it didn't bother me at all. It's like, okay, that's for later. Like, okay, if it was racist, then it's like, okay, we can both agree that whatever he said there was dumb. But that doesn't make me disagree with his arguments that he was saying, like, in this case or in this case. It doesn't make his books any less valid.
Yeah, and I mean, not to get into the newsletter, I just don't care about those anymore. But I read what people said that he wrote, and a lot of it was taken highly out of context. I mean, it really wasn't. It wasn't that bad, really. And a lot of the things that they also accused him of, his newsletter specifically, were things that he didn't even write. It was somebody writing for his newsletter. And at the time, he wasn't even in politics. He was practicing medicine. In fact, he blatantly came out and said this, like, look, I had nothing to do with the newsletter at the time. Maybe he should have had more oversight, but he was just like, I was practicing medicine. I wasn't even writing for that. So I disavow it. He said it multiple times, like, I disavow what was written. And can we move on? I have some ideas. Maybe we should end the Federal Reserve instead of talking about what somebody else wrote under my name several decades ago. And, that's the big thing. And, as far as these ad hominem attacks, calling people fascists, racists, and, anti-Semites and things like that, it's just so odd to me that's the criticisms made of people like Rothbard, von Mises, and Ron Paul, because the entire point of everything said and written by these people is the complete opposite of groupthink and treating people like a group instead of individuals. It's all about individualism. I mean, at the very core crux of all these writings are, it doesn't matter what race you are. All that matters is who you are as an individual, what you're capable of, what you want to do with your life, and you have the freedom to make your own choices. I mean, what's a better message than that? I've yet to hear it. And the other one final thing, as far as Ron Paul is concerned, Ron Paul talked about racism once, and it's interesting because he is called a racist sometimes, despite the fact that when he's talked about racism, he's made arguments that I feel are vastly superior against racism than any typical social justice warrior has made. For example, he's talked about racism in terms of groupthink and treating people as a commune rather than an individual, and that is not the best way to think. We should be treating people as individuals. And that once you go down this road as treating everybody as a group, then you basically lose your humanity in a sense. You lose your individual nature. And so he's basically saying racism is a ridiculous viewpoint. It's a ridiculous thing to put any stock into because it treats people as a group rather than an individual. To me, that's a far superior argument against racism than anything your social justice person out on the streets with the sign is saying.
Yeah, and it's actually interesting that they choose the word like fascist or like any other collectivist term to refer to him as, because it's like that really does show that they can't counter anything he says. Because if I thought that Ron Paul was if I thought his ideas were atrocious and evil, like if I thought libertarianism was just awful, I would say, you can't trust that guy. He's a libertarian. Or like, you can't support him. He's a libertarian. But they don't call him that. They call him a fascist or something like that. It's like if his views are really so bad, it's like, tell me what, like, or if his arguments are so bad, it's like, tell me, or address the arguments. Tell me what his arguments are. But instead they have to like take a completely different term like fascism just out of nowhere and apply it to him to cover it up. And it's like at this point, the terms like racist and all that. I mean, they pretty much lost their whole meaning, because at this moment, anyone that's not a communist is a racist. But when I hear someone being accused of racism, like, the first thing I do is I Google them, I look them up, I watch some of their videos or books or whatever they're doing, because it's like, okay, this person was called a racist. That means they like stood up for something at one point and said something that wasn't really far left. Now, sometimes they are genuine racists, and it's like, okay, I don't like this guy. Or sometimes they are genuine racists, and I look at their arguments for it, and it's like, no, I have plenty of counter arguments for this. It just doesn't work. But other times it's like with Walter Block being accused of supporting slavery in the New York Times. If I actually look into it, it's like, no, that's not what he was saying at all. Well, now I'm a fan of Walter Block because you called him a racist, so I looked into what he said, and it was great. Like, if you hadn't called him a racist, I might have never heard of this guy.
Yeah. And you know what? The best one is when libertarians like Ron Paul or von Mises or any of these people are called a fascist. It's so odd to me, because fascism at one of its core things is ultra-nationalism. I mean, doing things for the country. It is a smashing of individualism, which is the complete opposite, the complete antithesis of everything any libertarian-minded person stands for. I never heard Ron Paul say, forget who you are as a person and just do what's best for the country. That would be such an odd thing. You would never hear him say that, because it's the complete opposite of everything that he stands for and as libertarians stand for. So the number one thing is, once I hear somebody call someone like Ron Paul or von Mises a fascist, I immediately know that they've read probably one article written by a left-winger, and then they think that they know everything there is to know about these people. And I know that, okay, either this conversation is going to be me talking to a brick wall, or maybe I can shed some light on this for these people, because they obviously have a confirmation bias at the very least.
Yeah, and I have my own personal rule now, after I've seen this happen so often, that like, if I were to be asked for like an opinion on someone like Sean Hannity or whatever, well, I've never read his books, I've never watched his show, I've heard some bad things about him from libertarians, but at the moment I have zero opinion, because I've never watched his stuff. Like, I've only seen opinions from other people. Now, I have a general idea of what I might expect if I actually do sit down, which I will one of these days, but until then, like, I say I don't know. And I see too many people, it's like they read, like you said, they read one left-wing article on Ron Paul or someone like that, and it's like, oh, now I know this person's terrible, and I know everything about him, and it's like, no. Like, I wanted to give an opinion on Keith Olbermann the one time. I don't really like Keith Olbermann, so I had sat down, I watched 10 episodes of his Resistance show, and I read one of his books, and it's like, okay, now I can say with good conscience that I don't like this person. Or at least I don't like the arguments they're throwing. I don't think they're very good arguments. Yeah, it's like, imagine if people did that. Imagine if people actually like didn't just say, oh, he's a racist, well, that makes him a terrible person. It's like, no.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate for the leftists, because there are some people like Sean Hannity, as you mentioned, who like I mentioned before, I was a 2004 Bush supporting Republican. I watched Sean Hannity freaking religiously, like all the time. I watched him, so I've seen a lot of his shows. I haven't watched him much recently. I actually don't get Fox News where I am, so I see clips of him on YouTube from time to time. But the thing is when I was, back in 2004, heavily conservative Republican, I loved everything he said. He could do no wrong, Sean Hannity. Everything he said, I was like, oh, that's great, fantastic. That's what I'm supposed to believe. And now that I'm a libertarian, I throw myself into the lot with Ron Paul, von Mises, Hayek, and all them. I can watch his show, and now it's like maybe I couldn't put an exact number on it. Maybe 30% of the things he says, I'm like, okay, yeah, I mean, I could agree with that. And then there's a whole host of other things where I'm like, I just always go back to the basics. Aren't you supposed to be a conservative Republican? Aren't you supposed to be for small government? And he says so many things that will just advocate for a huge government. And it's too bad for the leftists who criticize him, because if they actually took the time to really watch what he says, they might be able to form actual arguments against him. I always say this about people who supported Hillary Clinton in this past election. People want to just throw kind of empty criticisms at Trump, just call him a Nazi and things like that. And it's like, all right, well, you're not going to get anywhere with anyone, because obviously he's not a Nazi. But Hillary Clinton as a candidate, back when she was running, she could have many times brought up legitimate points against Trump, which she didn't. She never did, right? When Trump was asked in an interview about tariffs, and the interviewer basically told him, hey, look, you want to put these tariffs on to punish China, okay, but you're going to punish every single solitary American with huge price increases on everything that we buy. And Donald Trump blatantly looked right at the camera and said, I don't care. Basically, I don't care. My goal is to punish China. And so it's like, that would have been something of actual substance. Now, they could have gone back and forth and debated it, but that would have been something of substance that Hillary Clinton could have used against Trump. But what does she do? She does what all her supporters do and just, oh, they're a basket of deplorables. And it's like, all right, are we 10 years old in kindergarten here or whatever? It's like this, you could do a lot better. Not that I want you to, but you could have.
Yeah, and it tends to backfire actually quite a lot. Like when I think of when you think about like the alt-right, or at least what I have seen of the alt-right, like I have a few conversations where, like, not publicly, but I've had conversations with them in the past, like over social media on certain things, and it's like before that, or those are all really recent, and before that, like, I had no idea who they were. I remember when the deplorables thing came out, like, and Hillary did her speech attacking the alt-right, like, I didn't know what they were. I'd never heard the term before, and even then I still didn't really know, but I knew it's something to bookmark and think, okay, well, if she's attacking them, they must not be all bad. And then the Richard Spencer thing, like, I had never heard of Richard Spencer before. Then he gets punched on the inauguration day, and all of a sudden he's, like, all over the news, and everyone knows who he is. And it's like, I never would have heard of these people. Now, of course, Richard Spencer was one of those people where I looked into him, and I was like, okay, he's not really for me. But it's like, I never would have heard of these people if they hadn't been attacked.
Yeah, I don't really know too much about Richard Spencer. I think I've seen one speech that he did, and he really went off about he didn't necessarily say that whites were superior, but he kind of had this vibe to him where he said, like, we should be in separate countries, like we should separate races, and that kind of I was like, okay, well, that's nutty. You see, that's kind of person where if you want to call someone a racist, like, that's the kind of person where I would say, all right, that makes sense. I could see exactly why you would say that. But when you're leveling that charge against people like Ron Paul or something, it's like, it just doesn't make sense. I just don't know where you're coming from.
And even with, like, Richard Spencer, where it's like, it's kind of like as you described, I don't think he's a supremacist, but he's an ethno-nationalist. And it's like, I mean, at that point, it doesn't, he's still wrong. But even then, it's like, if they really did make that distinction, it's like, okay, I at least appreciate that you know enough to make the distinction. I know that, like, you're knowledgeable on the topic you're talking about. Whereas it's like when it's everyone's a racist, it's like, that doesn't help me at all. That just says that okay, if you can't get really into detail, like again with Ron Paul being a fascist, it's like, okay, if you're all the way back there, it's like, I know I'm not going to get anything productive from you on this topic.
Yeah, exactly. It become, once it goes down that road, or not even goes down that road, once it starts off at that starting point, it's kind of like, I'm not going to get anywhere with this person. At this point, it's just an exercise in debate. That's what this is. It's not like trying to convince anybody, because if somebody, that would be like me calling Karl Marx a free market capitalist. It's like, well, I just don't know what you're talking about. What are you talking about?
Yeah, it's just so out of the ballpark. It's like, okay, if you level that accusation, it's like, okay, if the person you're talking to knows any more about this person than you've lost them, because you've just given it away right there. It's just, it's just completely unproductive and counterintuitive in the end.
Really, what it comes down to is, I think a lot of these people view the world in such black and white. It's if you do not have our DNA into everything you say, and you don't have your program exactly as ours is, then you're just as bad as everyone else. There's no gray area whatsoever, right? So Richard Spencer, like I said, I don't know much about him, but from what I do know, people want to call him like literal Hitler. Now, is that really a reasonable thing to say? I don't know, but I don't think he's killed people. I don't think he's advocated for killing people. So it's kind of like there is a gray area there. Is he not a good person? I'm totally open to hearing that he's not. But, you know, just because I heard him say a couple dumb things when it comes to race, I'm not ready to say he's a Nazi. But...
And something I noticed that actually, like, that gives off, like, the way you're wording things. It's like, that is how it should be. You're wording things of, like, every time you're, like, you're not about to make an accusation when we're talking about, like, Richard Spencer, which, again, like, neither of us know too much, so there's not really much we can say about him. And it's like, we're emphasizing that we do not know that much, therefore take our argument, take what we're saying with a grain of salt. It's like, we are putting out there that this is our level of knowledge before we say anything. It's like, yeah, that's what I respect.
Yeah, and I think that's an extremely important thing for a lot of people to begin doing and to learn how to do is to say, I don't know about something. There's nothing wrong with saying you don't know. And in fact, when people can't say, I don't know, this is what we get. We get people who have very limited knowledge, but they speak in a way as if they're experts on it. The same, you can see the same thing with pretty much anything. You know, people will have an opinion on social justice or gun control, and they'll read one article. They really don't know much about it, but they'll start rattling off a couple numbers that they memorized, and they'll say, see, I can solve the problem. So it's just a ridiculous thing that people need to be able to understand when they don't know something, and there's no shame in saying, hey, you know what? I haven't really read much about it. I haven't read that person's book. I haven't seen a video of them. I've never read any article written by them. Let me hold off judgment and wait until I'm a bit more knowledgeable.
Yeah, and that's actually something I like about libertarianism very much, is I'm actually surprised libertarians themselves don't seem to show this humbleness towards certain things, because overall libertarianism is like, I don't know. It's kind of like, it's like, I don't know how to run society. I don't know what's the best way to do this. All I can say is, how about we let the people, like, let each person decide, because they're probably the best person to figure that out. Like, I don't know what the best way to allot, like, a government budget is. All I can say is, hey, how about if we cut it as much as possible, and we can let individuals decide what to do with their own money. Like, I don't know. It's like, nobody knows. Nobody knows that. Nobody has enough information to take that, like, top-down decision-making. So you need to really just say, let people make their own choices, and we got to hope for the best.
I think you stole the words right out of my mouth. I think you hit the nail on the head there. You're right. Libertarianism, a part of it is I don't know. But the important thing to remember is that you don't know either. So, and certainly a few thousand people in a city on the East Coast in Washington, D.C., they don't know either. They can't make good decisions for people who live in Montana, right? It's a ridiculous experiment that will fail. I mean, I can tell you that right now. And it's just one of those things where people just have a strong opinion when they don't really know anything. There are all, and you see it whenever you see opinion polls, right? Like I saw an opinion poll, I forget where it was, but it was just like, it was asking about the next gun massacre. Like, do you think a gun massacre will occur, or a mass shooting will occur in the next month? Like, yes, no, I don't know. And there were tons of yeses and tons of no's and a few I don't knows. And really that whole entire thing should have been I don't know.
Right.
Because how could they? So it's just one of those things where people just they don't feel comfortable with not having an opinion on something. we're very, like, I don't know, as a species, I guess we're just really uncomfortable with not having a theory on things, not having an idea. So when we don't have an idea, we'll take a junk one to fill to as filler, because we feel more comfortable with that. And if we have a conversation, then we're more at ease spewing out a bunch of BS rather than not spewing anything out at all.
Well, yeah, and it's really difficult to say you don't know. Like, it's a much easier way to just be like, yeah, this is my opinion. It's not very informed, but this is what I got. And to say I don't know, it's like then you kind of have to step back and say, well, I mean, if I want to be in this conversation, I have to read a whole book or 2 or 3 or 7. Like, I've got to watch all this. Like, we were talking about having opinions on people, but just having opinion or just having a stance on a certain topic. It's like, how many people have a stance on the minimum wage and on either way? And it's like, and haven't read absolutely any economics or any, like, or they're not thinking in terms of like incentives or any of that. It's like, I don't know if like I have an opinion on the minimum wage. I'm not sure if it's right, but I can say I've read at least quite a few economics books. Like, I have a whole shelf devoted just to stuff from the Mises Institute. It's like, okay, I can say, I have at least some backing here. I've heard all the arguments and I can come to a conclusion. And there's so many other people I've talked to where they're like, oh, it's just like raise the minimum wage to $20 an hour because it's the right thing to do or whatever, because it helps poor people. And if you're against it, then you're anti-worker. And my favorite phrase by SEIU, which is a union that I'm actually forced to be in right now at where I work, they used a phrase anti-worker extremist for people that were against the $15 minimum wage. And it's like, wow, you just don't understand, do you?
Yeah, that's ridiculous. You know what's funny about the minimum wage and unions in general? Actually, it's not funny. It's horrible and tragic. But back in like the 30s in the United States and also in South Africa, the minimum wage was very much supported by racist white people. And it was supported only for black people. So these racist white people were were basically advocating for minimum wage for black people. They said black people should be paid more. And because in an odd sense and in an ironic sense, these racists actually understood economics. They understood if we support a minimum wage for black people, that means that their unemployment's going to go way up. People aren't going to pay that money for them. And so therefore our white buddies are going to get the job. So it's like this weird thing where these racist people actually kind of understood basic laws of economics and used it to push a racist agenda. And fast forward 80, 90 years, people forgot all that. And they just say, let's just push the minimum wage up to help out the lowly person, not understanding what those racists once understood, that if you push the minimum wage up, then you are going to automatically take the most vulnerable amongst us and basically kick them out of the workforce. You're gonna kick out those bottom rungs of the ladder. But the thing that it seems to be occurring is they just see a number on a piece of paper and they just imagine a poor worker seeing a bigger paycheck and therefore they support it. But there's all these unintended consequences that are going to happen where, no, they're not going to see a bigger number on their paycheck. They're going to have no paycheck because the person who owns the business is going to look at their books and say, I cannot keep this person employed any longer. Otherwise, they're going to be out of a job and I'm going to be out of a job and everyone else I employ is going to be out of a job. So I have to let this person go. It never crosses their mind that that would happen.
So many people where it's like, yeah, they don't really think any further. that it's like, oh, that's all there is to it. And when you were pointing out like the racism behind it, that's one of my favorite arguments to use against certain people. Like if you ever talk to someone that's like, oh, this is racist, that's why we got to get rid of it. Like the Electoral College is racist, so we got to get rid of it. The what was it? Meteors were racist. That was one. Or like meteor showers were racist. That was it. There are certain people that argue.
I had never heard about this. What is meteor showers are racist?
Yeah. Do you remember the recent or semi-recent a few months ago, like that huge, amazing meteor shower? Or no?
Was it like last summer or something?
Yeah, there was a meteor shower last year. I forget which one it was. I'll find it and link in the description. But
I I actually saw some of it. I think it was cloudy. I don't remember
Oh.
I didn't remember hearing the opinions of the meteors on social justice, though.
Yeah, there was a, and actually, like, it's one of those things where the title is bad, the argument is bad, but if you read through it, it's not that bad if, like, you really try to understand what they're saying. But it just sounds awful because they were making the point of, well, this meteor shower was only visible in predominantly white locations, so therefore
Yeah.
it was racist.
Okay. So, I mean, Tokyo is only visible in Japan. Does that mean that Tokyo is racist?
Yes.
That makes no sense whatsoever.
Tokyo is racist. There we go. Yeah, like that was it though. That's the kind of argument that I was making, like, where racism isn't necessarily intent. It's, oh, if things aren't perfectly equal, that makes it racist, and therefore we should get rid of it. And my favorite argument to use was like what you mentioned of, it's like, okay, if something has racist roots, we should get rid of it. Okay, gun control laws, racist roots. It was like, hey, well, let's disarm the black population was
Yep.
some thoughts pretty earlier. And same thing with minimum wage. It was like, oh, if we raise the minimum wage, we'll put the black population out of work. Marriage laws, it was like, well, we shouldn't let black and white people marry, so let's introduce marriage laws, or let's get the government involved in marriage. It's like, you can slash off all kinds of different pro-government or like government overreaches into society by just looking at their history of racism and be like, okay, there we go.
You know what? You're actually making it sound kind of appealing. All right, let's do this thing. Let's get rid of all the things that have any racist roots.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
all
like,
for it now.
that's the easiest thing to do is like just say, okay, if we're going to take your logical conclusion, or if we're going to take your argument, then let's go to the logical conclusion of it and say, let's get rid of all this. And I mean, there's not much you can say against that. They either have to agree with you, in which case you kind of won, or they have to say, well, no, and toss out the argument, and then you've still won.
Yeah. And you know what? By that logic, let's get rid of everything with any racist roots. Well, the federal government used to institutionalize slavery, so hey, I like where we're going with this.
There we go.
Federal government.
The best anarcho-capitalist argument I've ever heard. There we go.
Yeah. Very, very. It's a learned opinion, I guess, that I just learned now. That I just thought of.
That's
Nah,
beautiful.
They're like, well, let's not go that far.
But that's, I mean, technically you could though. That's the point of that's overall my point is, like, you could justify quite a lot from the, if it's racist, get rid of it. And it's not even like, again, their definition of racism tends to be different than most people's, where, like, I would say racism has to have, like, an intent behind it, because, I mean, like, the wage gap thing where it's like women and men make different choices. That doesn't make it sexist. That's just the way it is, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's like you'll find some differences between, like, racial groups in certain things, and it's like, that's just the way it turned out. Like, of course, there's the argument of, like, why is the black population so poor? Well, there's the argument of, like, single family, or like single parenthood among the black population is super high. It's like 77% don't have a father figure or something nuts. I'll have to find the exact statistic that I'll link below. But
Yeah, no, I remember hearing that, and again, that was due in large part to the federal government basically going around and going to inner cities where a lot of black families were and telling them, hey, look, here is we have this war on poverty going on. Here is welfare money that you can receive because you earn below this threshold. If you were a single parent household, by the way, you'd be getting a lot of extra money. Now, not that I think that immediately made all these divorces happen, but certainly, as with any marriage, I've never been married, but from what I know, from what I've gathered, there's always turmoil, there's always arguments, and there's always friction in any marriage, and people want to work on their marriage. But if you've got this incentive always in the back of your mind, but like, man, if we get a divorce, I get a big, big check every month, that's going to make it a little bit more preferred if you pull out and kind of look at the thing and look at it in a big picture. That's going to make people tend towards divorce. And so there's a lot of arguments that kind of make that case is like, look, the federal government is at least partially at the core of why there are so many single parent households in the black community.
Yeah.
But the other one thing I wanted to mention as far as the gender wage gap, just because you mentioned it, and it has something to do with kind of the overarching theme we've been talking about, which is people not really looking into things. you kind of hit the nail on the head again, which was that the fact of the matter is, for whatever reason, and I don't know the answer to this, for whatever reason, women in general don't want to go into high-paying fields, right? Your science, your technology, engineering degrees, law degrees, medical degrees, maybe with the exception of nursing. All of these high-paying fields, there's no one stopping them from going into those fields. There's no one stopping them from going to college for these degrees and studying their faces off and getting a good-paying job. But for whatever reason, they don't want to. So that's at least a huge that should take care of a lot of why there is a gender wage gap. But they just want to jump into that. Well, there's just a patriarchal society that we live in, and then leave it at that. It's like, well, no, there's more to it.
Yeah, and what you were saying with like incentives, it's like we're not even saying that people are consciously thinking this, like, oh, I could get money from this. Like they're not. It doesn't always have to be conscious, but it's something you always kind of keep in the back of your mind, like, oh well, if this did happen, it's not as bad as it would be, kind of thing. And it's like that does play a role, whether you consciously think it does or not. Like, I mean, like the amount that I say, like the amount that I'm. The amount of time I'm devoting to like looking for a job or looking for a better paying job or something like that, there's the incentive structure of like, okay, am I going to be broke in like 6 months or a year kind of thing, like completely out of money. It's like that incentivizes you, and even if you're not consciously thinking about it, it's always in the back of your mind that like, oh, I gotta get on this, like that'll impact how you work. And same thing with just anything, like even minimum wage. Going back to that, it's like. There's all these incentives. If you like raise the cost of something, people are less likely to buy it. That's a disincentive to buy it.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of another little point stemming off of what you just said was the incentive that you might not consciously be thinking about it all the time, but it is in the back of your head. Has to do with welfare as well. I wouldn't say it's sort of a cliche thing to say, sort of a Republican cliche thing to say that if you get welfare, your incentive is gone to work. I know that there are a lot of people who receive welfare that would rather have a job and not be on welfare. But I don't think it's crazy to suggest that at least in the back of many people's minds who do receive welfare, they're probably thinking, well, if I don't find a job, it's all right. And I don't really have to try as hard as I otherwise would have to, because I've always got this to fall back on. Let's just call it for what it is. I've got other people's money to fall back on that's given to me by the government that takes it by force. But I digress. I think that's an important point, that there has to be somewhere in these people's subconscious or just in the back of their mind of, I don't really have to go at it as hard as I otherwise would have because I've got this fallback. Like I said, I just want to repeat in case whoever hears this is saying, oh, so he's saying that cliche Republican thing. I'm not saying that like, oh, they're just lazy, they never want to work. I wouldn't say that for all of them. Certainly there's probably some. In fact, I've seen videos, downright videos of some people who are on welfare who say, I don't need to work, I get my welfare. It's like, all right, well, you're a parasite.
Well, yeah, and even if like the Republican cliche tends to be like a malicious thing, like saying that though they're doing it maliciously, but it's not even necessarily that. It's like even someone that like I would say like, okay, they're down on their, like they lost their job, like they had, it's not their fault. Like say, pick someone that it's not their fault at all. It just so happened to be super unlucky, and now they're out of money and they have to find a way to feed their family and they're on welfare. It's like they're probably looking for a job, and I respect that, and say they're doing everything right. They're the most respectful person ever, and I respect them for looking for a job. But the fact that they have it is a disincentive. It might be a very minor disincentive, and I'm not even just saying take it out like that nullifies everything. But even though I'd like to do it through private charity, but it's still there. Like no matter what even if you're genuinely like you feel bad being on welfare and you don't want to be and you're out for a job, there's still that incentive in the back of your mind of if I needed to take a day or like if I needed to slow things down a little bit, I could, because you're not constantly like there's not that pressure of if I don't get a job, my family might not eat kind of thing. Like it's like that's no longer there. And I'm not necessarily saying it should be there, but that's just how it works.
Yeah, and I think there's a big distinction to be made between somebody, as you just described, someone who, wants to work, has a family, just down on their luck, that kind of thing. Yeah, I disagree with welfare. I do. And as you said, I'd rather it done through private charity. And if we didn't take so much money away and to the tune of trillions of dollars every every year, maybe we'd be able to do that. But there's a distinction to be made between somebody like that, who's just down on their luck, and somebody who purposefully doesn't get a job to get welfare money. Those two, if I were to have a conversation with both of those people independently, both of those conversations would be very different from one another. Right? One person, it would be, I'm not a jerk. I have empathy for the person down on their luck. That would be one conversation of like, yeah, this is a tough time. To the other person, it would be a lot more, you're a parasite, that kind of thing. Like, I wouldn't really hold back with somebody who knowingly doesn't work because they know they can live off the backs of other people. And that's their sole motivation. It's like, you're a parasite and I don't have one good thought about you. To the other people, I could very well have plenty of positive thoughts about them. I disagree with the system that exists around them. And I understand why they're taking advantage of the system that surrounds them. I think that it's not that I want to take their welfare away, as I would rather have a system set up, or an anti-system set up, where they don't need welfare because it's so easy to get a job, right?
Right. Your
neighbor down the street wants their the floor cleaned. You should be able to go do that and get a $20 bill from them easily. Like, there should be no forms, there should be nothing. That's a hypothetical situation, of course, but you understand my point. It should be the easiest thing in the world.
Right, and even then, like, that's another point of, like, incentive structures. It's like, okay, now it's harder to open a business, harder to get a job, there's just so much red tape you have to go through. I'll post the exact number in the description because I can't remember. But it's like, for barbershop classes or, like, hairstyling, it's something like hundreds of hours that you have to go through of training before you're legally allowed to open up that business. And it's like, that's how you disincentivize it, for one. Two, that's how you raise the price because they have to pay off all their loans.
Yeah. That's funny because I know personally somebody who's a hairstylist, and so I was right there with them when they were going through all that stuff. And the entire time, I had to walk away a few times because they were trying to study, and I was there saying, "This is BS. You shouldn't have to do this." So, okay, I agree with you, but for God's sakes, right now I got to do this. It's like, all right, I'll walk away. But it's ridiculous because since they are a hairstylist now and they've been that for several years, never once has a customer walked in and asked to see their credentials. The only thing anyone has ever cared about was, hey, my friend Nancy, they got their hair cut from you and it looked really good. Can you do the same? That's it. It's this thing I refer to as reputation over regulation, right? Reputation is far more superior.
That's a very good phrase.
Yeah, is far superior than regulation in figuring out who's good and who's going to do a bad job.
Yeah, when it comes to the hairstylist, like, it's really easy to see the results right there. Like you said, you're not walking in looking for credentials. You can see exactly what you get there. You look and it's like, okay, this is the results of this person's labor. I don't care if they have a credential to back it up. That doesn't make it look any nicer, but I can base my entire decision off that. Now, I understand, like, maybe if you want to get a major surgery or something, but even then, like, I'm not going to say, okay, what's your credentials to the surgeon? I'm going to ask other people and say, like, how'd your surgery go? Like, what's his rate? I'm going to look at his statistics and say, what's his rate of, like, post-surgical infections and that. I'm not going to look at the degree on his wall and say, okay, you've got the best one. Let's go.
I think that's really interesting because when you have a conversation with your average person, if you were to say something like, and I know you're not saying this, but if you were to say something like surgeons shouldn't have any licensing, I think they shouldn't have any licensing from the state, but I certainly would hope they have been through some courses. But if you were to say that to somebody, they would immediately have like a big reaction, like, that's insane. But the thing they don't realize, or many people who would say that, a lot of people act in that way in their own personal lives anyway, because they probably do the exact same thing you just said. They probably don't go to a hairstylist and look for their degree. They probably don't go to a doctor and look for a degree. They do exactly what you just said. They ask other people. They go on reviews, which is what I did. To find a doctor where I moved, I looked on Google and I just found reviews of the person, and I said, I'm going there. By doing that, you're actually elevating the reviews that you're reading. You're elevating those reviews above any licensing that they got from a college or from the state or from the federal government. And people don't realize that's what they're doing. But when you actually come out and put it into words like that, then they have this visceral reaction of, how could you ever think of doing something like that? It's like, yeah, but you act in a way in which if the world was set up like this, you act like you would in that world anyway. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and actually, like, someone might even say a counter argument to you of, I don't look for their degree because I know they have one, kind of thing. Well, even then, it's like, okay, how many people would want to go to a doctor without a degree? I mean, you might have some people that would say, I'm fine if he doesn't have a degree because his prices are $100 cheaper, depending on whatever he's charging. But most people, I think, would be like, no, I'd want them to have a degree. Well, there you go. Like, if most people want their physician to have a degree, I assume when they're Googling, they'll say, okay, they're going to look for the first thing of, does he have a degree? Okay, good. Well, then you're going to go from there and say, what about, like, again, post-surgical infections and all that if he's a surgeon or whatever. And, like, that's just a small piece of the puzzle. Like, if that many people want a physician with a degree, you're going to have plenty of physicians out there with degrees, assuming in this hypothetical example that it was legal to practice and not have one.
Yeah, and I mean, I can speak just personally. Whenever I go to a doctor, whether or not they have a degree, honestly, never even crosses my mind. It really doesn't. It really just it depends on the reviews. Now, as it happens, all doctors today have degrees and they have licensing. So yeah, as you said, it would be a market thing. If the market demanded that people have these degrees from some institution, then they're going to need a degree to get anywhere. And I have a suspicion that there would be markets for that, certainly, without government intervention. But that being said, I think the point still remains that at least everyone I know, and I know this is anecdotal, I understand that. People I know, they could care less. They don't think about it. It never crosses their mind. It certainly doesn't cross my mind.
And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, how many people, when they go to a doctor, they say, are you caught up on all of your continuing education? Like, can I see your continuing education, your proof that you've taken it? And yeah. It's like, yeah, nobody really checks for that. And that can be important because medicine updates all the time, but no one ever thinks about it. They're just like, okay, I got a good recommendation from my two friends. They've had you. Sure.
Yeah, you know what's funny too? Just to kind of pull back a little bit. Whenever I get I've had a couple conversations with people about hairstylists needing this licensing, and obviously I'm against it. I never even realized that there actually are people out there who agree with the fact that they should need this licensing, and this conversation always ends up talking about brain surgeons and things like that, and it's like. And then we go down, and 30 minutes later, I'm like, well, wait a second. We weren't even talking about brain surgeons. We're talking about somebody cutting hair or coloring hair, which is the one that I always hear. Well, a lot of these chemicals are dangerous that they color hair with. And again, to me, it's like, yeah, but they sell those same products in the store. You can go home and do it yourself. And many people do, and nothing bad ever happens. I've never heard of an epidemic of people with hair coloring products, getting horrible diseases and whatnot from using these products. So I really think that there's this slight fear, and they just have this gut reaction to say the government needs to come in and make sure nothing bad ever happens. And then you get a nonsense country like what we live in now.
Yeah, how many people have you ever met that have been like, that have gone to, or have been like, you know what, I just can't find a single hairstylist. Like, I think they should all have more education because I went to one and I wasn't happy, and then I went to all the others and I still wasn't happy. So, you know what, they just need 1,000 more hours of education. It's like, no, the vast majority of people, they find one they like and they're good, and if they don't like it, then they find another one and then they're good, and it's like, that's it. No one's really going far enough. The average person is not advocating for this.
Yeah, and guess what? If somebody cuts hair and they cut multiple people's hair and they do a terrible job on all of them, and these multiple people call and complain to the manager or the person who owns the place, guess what's going to happen to that stylist? They're going to get fired. And so but if we have the state coming in and saying, no, this is a professional hairstylist, then they're more likely to be able to keep getting employment. Even if they get fired from job after job, they're going to say, hey, look, I have this thing from the government, and the employer is going to say, oh, fantastic, you're licensed, you've got to be good. And so this person who shouldn't be a hairstylist keeps getting a job, whereas if you had a pure market forces at work here, and not the pollution of the government, then this person would have a lot tougher time finding a job doing a hairstylist. Meanwhile, the market should be telling that person, hey, you know what? Styling hair is not for you. You should probably find something else to do.
Yeah, it's like, you know what the best way to tell if someone support or if people want something or not is to like see if they put their money where their mouth is. Like if people want something, they will pay for it. That tends to be the case in the vast majority of cases. And it's like you have like a good marker right here to see what people want. You can just look at reality around you and say, well, this worked for this person, this didn't work when this person tried this. And it's like we can see just by people saying, I don't want to pay for this, or, oh, I actually do pay for it, this is why I pay for it. Like, you can just figure that out there. You don't need to say, okay, well, we're just going to add, again, another few hundred hours of education onto this career because we think it's not good enough.
Yeah, and you know what's funny? Back when I was younger, there was a hairstyle where you had like a fade going up, and then like the top of your hair like was bleached, and that was using hair coloring, and it was using a razor and all that kind of stuff. And I remember when I was a teenager, there was a kid in my neighborhood who was really good at doing this haircut. All he did was basically just figure out. I don't know how he figured out how to do it. I tried cutting somebody's hair once. It was bad. There was alcohol involved too. So, but I digress. This kid in my neighborhood used to charge a bunch of people throughout the entire school just like $10. Like, you come to his garage and get your hair cut, like get a really good, like have your hair bleached or colored if you want something different, and have this fade up going on. And so it's funny because it was just a bunch of teenagers who circumvented all this entire argument of licensure in hairstyling. It was just a bunch of teenagers that they didn't know it at the time, and they probably still don't know it, but they were, in a sense, kind of giving the bird to the government, saying, hey, look, we're doing what you're saying is unbelievably dangerous. And guess how many happy people there are in this high school with awesome haircuts? Because one kid is really good at something and said, hey, you want it done for $10? You would have to go over there and pay $30 for the coloring and the haircut and all that stuff. Come and give me $10 and 30 minutes of your time, and I'll have it done for you. And it's like, nobody ever got hurt. Nobody was even remotely close to being hurt. So it's just a weird thing when people advocate for government to keep them from danger. It's a weird thing that we do. People do.
And just imagine if the cops had shown up to this kid in the garage and been like, okay, you got to shut this down or we're going to take you off to juvie or something. It's like, who's going to support that? Who's going to be like, well, I mean, the kid was giving away free haircut, or the kid was giving away cheap haircuts. Better lock him up in jail. Like, this guy's a real threat to society. It's like, no one, like, in practice, no one would actually look at that and say, well, I guess so.
Yeah, and I think that it's always good in any of these conversations to kind of at least attempt to kind of distill it down to its base parts. And that is really a good thing to do, to kind of provide some perspective. In essence, somebody who is really advocating for all these licensing, and it doesn't have to be just hairstylists, but that's the easiest one to work with, because it's just so clearly ludicrous. It's always good to boil it down to its base parts. Basically, somebody who's advocating these licensing is advocating for someone to be thrown into a cage at least, or to have a great deal of their money taken away from them if they and another person mutually agree for one person to do something to another person and have that other person give them money to do it. They ultimately are saying, we want that person thrown into jail or have tons of their money taken away from them if they are found to have engaged in this behavior without proper basically permission to do so from the government. It's always good whenever I'm in a conversation with people about this kind of stuff to kind of make them aware, give them perspective. This is what you're advocating. I don't know if you realize it, but you're advocating violence against people who are doing nothing wrong.
Yeah, that's honestly the best thing to do, is to just take the logical conclusion of their argument. It's like, okay, if we're basing it off of this principle, then, I mean, we don't want to be hypocritical and say, like, oh, this principle applies now, but it won't in this case. Or that, like, if we want to be consistent, then we have to, like, come to a conclusion of this is what we're going to have to accept. And it's like, how many people are going to say, well, yeah, I mean, if a few kids have to be thrown in jail for having, like, small businesses out of their garage like that everyone wants, it's like, no, it's like, once you reach the same principle of that and show that, like, this is what you're advocating for, yeah, it really does help open people up or to what they're actually saying. And it works a lot better than throwing out, like, 96 different stats in 10 seconds, which, I mean, it is technically a counter argument, but it's just not very convincing.
Yeah, it's always better to kind of boil things down to, like I said, to their base parts, to just the core crux of the issue. And the other funny thing is a lot of the people who advocate for, hairstylist licensing, it's funny because I would imagine that if they walked by a garage and saw some teenager given with a line of other teenagers outside the garage to get a haircut, they probably wouldn't think anything of it. They'd probably be like, oh, that's funny. It's a good business decision. Ha ha ha. And they'd walk about and they'd go about their day and they wouldn't think of anything of it. But then when you're talking about not that situation in a barber shop where there actually might be reviews and ways for people to gauge whether or not they want to go there, now all of a sudden the tone shifts completely, and it's now the government has to be involved, despite the fact that the situation is not that much different at all. It's this weird thing that people do when the government gets involved.
And it's like, you want to know the best way to figure out if it works, like if this is a good law or not. It's like, I mean, you can't do this in every case, of course, but in the hairstylist case, it's like, you want to know if people really think the hairstyling or education requirements are important. Okay, give people the option to not get this requirement, but say, like, just temporarily at least, or just for the time being, to say, like, okay, you have to plaster on your door whether you're licensed or not. And you'll have plenty of people who might, or you'll have some people who'd be like, well, I want someone that's licensed. And there's not going to be that many, I don't think. But then you can really put it to the test. Like, I think what would probably happen to begin with is people wouldn't like the idea of unlicensed, of going to someone that's not licensed, so they probably wouldn't. But then over time, you'll see, like, hey, I like this person, but they're not licensed, so people start going to them. And eventually, you can just look at it. It's a case study right there. You can see what happens. And in the end, you'll most likely see that people don't really care. They'll say whoever does the best job.
Yeah, I'm going out on a limb here and making a little bit of a prediction with little to no evidence. But I would imagine that if we got rid of all licensing within hairstyling and cosmetology, the world wouldn't end. And I think, as you said, over time, people would find, we actually really didn't need the government involved in that. And I go to a person who cuts my hair. They do a really good job. They never so much as scratched a part of my head. I think people would find that would end up being the case.
Well, I'll go against you and predict a dystopian future where everyone's bald because no one knows how to cut hair because every barbershop is just unlicensed and it's just all chaos and fires everywhere and just it's all awful.
Yeah, you convinced me. Karl Marx is right, and
yeah.
And you need a license to cut hair. And
just people won't even know what hair is in 20 years if we allow that because it's just going to be all gone everywhere.
Yeah, if you ever need a brain surgery, call me up.
There we go.
I saw a YouTube video once. I know what I'm doing.
There we go. Yep, I graduated from the University of YouTube, and I watched it. Yeah, I watched a 4-minute video. I got. It's not very convincing.
No, it's not. And you certainly weren't kidding. We started off at point A, and now we're at like point X. I don't.
That's what happens. We tangent, whether people like it or not. We tangent.
Yeah. I don't even remember how did we even start this video off? I don't remember.
Well, I'll have to listen back and see what happened. But we are still under the same topic of just kind of libertarianism in general.
Yeah, that's very, very true. I don't know. I think overarching is there. I think we could find an overarching thing here, which is a lot of people have strong opinions on things that they don't really know much about, and it's really good to say that you don't know. And the other thing is people, when they don't have an opinion on something, they'll just say that they have a strong opinion on it. And the only reason why that's really pertinent to libertarianism, in my opinion, is that I find that I run into that all the time. Like I'll just have, anytime I have a conversation with somebody, which more or less happens on the internet, nobody in my personal life, it's generally, I'll say something, and even though they might agree with it, they just have this knee-jerk reaction that the government needs to be involved because it's just the run of the mill nowadays. Like there's something that the government's not involved in that's just weird to them, and it's too bad because that should be something to be celebrated. Something hasn't been poisoned by Washington D.C. Yeah, we should support it.
And I've had, actually the most convincing argument for me to really take a look at this was like someone, I can't remember who it was, told me like, okay, let's just start over. Like imagine we just have a blank slate, like we're starting from the beginning, like take out all of history, let's just start from the very, very beginning. Instead of saying this is how things are, should we change it? Let's say nothing is as it is now, like which decision do we make? And that I think that kind of helps because you're kind of forced to say, you're forced to stop saying should we change, and you're forced to start saying which option is better.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally valid, and it's a good way to look at it, because then you kind of escape the system that we're in now, and you're able to sort of have a perspective of, well, where do we want to go, and how do we get there? And partially that perspective, that sort of let's go back in time and just imagine we're starting over, that kind of gives you that opportunity to look at it from that way. Like, how would we start this thing if we were able to? And whatever the answer to that is, it's like, all right, well, let's work in sort of an odd saying, but let's work to get to that starting point.
Exactly. And yeah, like actually you did mention something earlier that like libertarianism and yet the kind of like humbleness of I'm not really sure, they do link together, and that is kind of our overall that's like our overall grand topic here of just let's figure things out. We don't have to know everything. We don't have to have all the answers. But if we can at least accept that like we're on the same page of let's figure it out, like let's step back and see what people say. Like, let's give people the choice. Let's give people the option to make a decision and see what happens. Like, that really helps.
Yeah, and you know what? I'll give you a slight little bit of pushback here, just so everybody knows that we're not all just agreeing with each other. I don't even know if we need to say let's figure it out, because this whole thing kind of reminds me of that article by Leonard Reed, iPencil. I'm sure you've heard of it.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have. So it's always interesting to think about that in context with a lot of these conversations, because obviously, very, very, very quick recap. It's like nobody on the planet Earth knows how to create a pencil. It's all these different parties and individuals who have never met who make it happen. One person in South America gets the rubber and puts it through a process and makes the eraser. Another person makes the iron from wherever, Scandinavia, and blah, blah, blah. And it all happens without government intervention, and it happens in a way where it ends up in a store where you can buy it for a penny, right? So no, we don't. So using the pencil as an example, we don't need to figure out how to make a pencil. And in fact, no group ever has had to sit down and say, let's figure out how to make a pencil. It automatically happens. It's like this spontaneous order that just occurs with people who want to get an ed product. We know that there is this one thing that needs to happen for this product. well, we can just figure out this one little tiny thing, but all these different parties across the globe figuring out their one little thing, it comes together spontaneously and blah, blah, blah. You know the rest of the story. The reason why I bring this up is because it's always interesting to just tell that to people who don't know the story of iPencil, to just try and give them a little perspective of how little they actually need the government. They seem to think that without the government, things would just fall apart. But there are amazing things that happen every day without the bullhorn of the government. And it happens and you get this product and you pay almost nothing for it. In fact, that product is so available, you could see one on the side of the street and not be clamoring for it. You would just kick it away from you.
Yeah, and actually, yeah, that's a very good point. I completely forgot about iPencil, and it's like, yeah, that was probably one of the first like libertarian things I read was iPencil, and it's like that's genius the way they address it. It's like, yeah, everything kind of just comes together, and nobody's like, you have a few people talking to each other, and that like step 9 and step 10 of the eraser, those people are talking, but you're not going to have like the person at each of the step 1s of the eraser and the wood and all that and the graphite. They're not going to be talking to the guy that finished the pencil. It's all just kind of goes through its process.
Yeah, it happens spontaneously. And after reading iPencil, the number one thing that I think of whenever I hear someone says, well, Washington, D.C. needs to figure this out. They really need to craft the perfect legislation to tell everyone what to do. I'm like, no, they actually don't. They really don't. I mean, can you imagine if Congress spent, let's say, an entire year on crafting legislation to have the pencil market become perfect? I guarantee you it would not be nearly as efficient as it is now with no government intervention, or relatively none. Obviously, they're involved in everything, but you know what I mean. They're not dictating where the resources go at all times in all places. And if they started doing that, it doesn't matter how much time and mental power they put in to try and quote solve the problem, they would make the situation worse. So it's just funny whenever I hear somebody saying Washington, D.C. needs to figure this out for all of us. It's like, no, they don't. We can figure it out. The iPhone wasn't directed by government, right? So it's like, if they don't need to direct the iPhone production, which is an unbelievable technological feat that was pure science fiction just 20 years ago, if they weren't needed for that, I don't think that we need them for cosmetology. And bring it back around.
Yeah, whenever I see that, like, especially after now that the whole gun control debate's back in the news of like, oh, Congress needs to take action. They need to stop sitting around to do something. It's like, no. I want them to sit around and do nothing, and I want to like, I prefer it if they kind of just step back and let us figure things out. Like, or yeah, I shouldn't say figure things out, but like kind of like a bottom up versus top down solution. Like, let's we can each do our part here to stop this, or to stop mass shootings. Like, I don't want to get into that whole thing. That's a whole nother conversation. But there's something each of us can do, and we don't need like the government to save us all from this. It's like, no, there are plenty of other ways to fix it.
Yeah, and you know what? A lot of the ways to fix. Not that as you said, you don't want to get into gun control. I understand that because we'd probably be here until 10 o'clock at night. But the solutions that I think would actually work involve getting the government out of it, right? The war on drugs, ending that would immediately, you would see a huge decline in gun violence.
For sure, yeah.
I mean, anyone who looks at it, I don't know how you can come away with any other conclusion. The other thing that I say, again, it has to do with the individual. Turn off CNN and Fox News and MSNBC and all these mainstream media outlets that constantly become a 24/7 documentary on the shooter's life, and they constantly, vomit up the body count on your screen 24/7. Stop watching them, make the viewership go down, and make their ad revenue go down, because all that does is serve to the next psychopath. Say, hey, if I go and do that plan that I've been thinking about doing, I can become the next, anti-hero of the day in the United States. And that's what they want. And it's like, well, you could actually, I'm not saying that's a guaranteed seal, airtight way to stop shootings, but it's certainly much better than anything the government can offer you. And, I think that's a point that should be made more often.
Exactly. It's just like the whole, someone else, like, everyone right now is just shouting, with not just gun control but everything. It's like everyone's shouting someone should really do something. It's like, okay, why not you? It's like I get that you can't solve, like, again, just the context of mass shootings. It's like I get that you cannot stop all mass shootings, but it's like you can do your individual role to, like, you have some influence on this. And it's like, it's just do, like, instead of just saying, oh, government better fix this, it's like, come up with something. Like, really put enough care into it that you're actually going to do something about it, instead of just sitting around even then, when I say do something about it, I don't mean cry for the government, like do the act of begging the government to come do something for you. It's like, there's so much you can do if you really care. Like, just stop calling for the government to fix it. Actually take action yourself.
Yeah, and I think what it comes down to is the people don't want to do that. They don't want to take it. They don't want to take the responsibility to do it. Like I had mentioned before, people, as far as gun control is concerned, not watching the news and making sure their viewership and their ad revenue goes down when they become spokespeople for these psychopaths, that most people can reasonably see, that could do something. But then what do they actually do? They don't actually shut the TV off. They actually keep it on. Because they just want to be able to rally behind Washington, D.C. doing something and then say that, see, I did my part. But if it actually affects their personal life at all, people shy away from that, which is unfortunate.
When it comes to, like, again, I'll mention it one more time, the school shooting thing, just for the context of an argument that can be used in other things. How many people actually think the debate is between, like, I mean, school shootings, I guess, are kind of bad, but I mean, if to keep my AR-15, I'm fine if 100 school shootings happen. I'm perfectly okay if people die as long as I get my gun. Like, how many people actually believe that? Nobody is like, yeah, school shootings are okay. Like, we're all on the same side of, yes, school shootings are bad, and I'm sick of, like, so many people saying, well, the other side is, they don't care about this. They don't care if school shootings happen. They're just in for it for their agenda. And for some media sources, that is certainly true. But for the average person, like, everyone's like, yes, I want to stop a school shooting. And it's like, okay, like, can we at least get on that page of, like, let's figure out, or again, not figure out, but now I can't say that anymore. But can we at least, like, have a discussion on the best way to solve the issue, or the best way to go about this, or what's causing it, instead of just being like, oh, if you disagree with me, you want school shootings to happen. It's like,
Yeah, and another thing that kind of goes back to our original point of people just believing things or saying things just because, even though they don't really have all the facts, and not being okay with just saying I don't know, is that, and again, as far as school shootings or gun violence in general, because really school shootings, I mean, I regard any innocent person dying for whatever reason as horribly tragic, right? I regard all innocent people dying from guns as equally tragic. There's no like, oh, well, it happened in the school, so it's worse there than if it happened in a church or a supermarket or in an open field. Doesn't matter to me. Any of them are all tragic. So one of the things that is funny is when people are asked, and there have been polls done on this, like, is gun violence going up or down? A huge majority of people consistently say gun violence is on the rise, which is just factually incorrect. Gun violence has been going down, 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 and down for the past many years. But the thing is you watch the media enough, and all they do, and you've got your iPhone in your pocket, you've got your laptop on your lap, and you've got the TV on the wall, and you've got media surrounding you 24/7, constantly screaming in your face of every violent thing that happened among 320 million people across 4 million square miles. You're gonna have this wrong perspective, this erroneous perspective that violence is a lot more widespread than it actually is. And so people get this false perspective that it's more violent, and then they're more likely to say government needs to do something, everything's getting out of hand. Actually, really, things have become more in hand, in a way, than they have been in recent history. But people just don't know that, and they don't care to look it up. It really doesn't take that much of an effort with Google to just go look it up. But they just really want to have a strong opinion on it instead of saying, I'm not really sure, to be honest. I've never seen a graph. I've never seen a study, but I have seen CNN, and I know that they talk about guns. So, yeah, there's a lot of gun violence going on, and it's increasing every day. It's like, no, it's not.
Yeah, and like think of what is it? There's 18 school shootings that have happened so far this year. Well, if you look up the 18 school shootings in 2018, like 14 of the 18, no one was injured or no one died. I'll find it and post it. But yeah, it's like one was a gun went off. A gun went off at a school or at in a parking lot outside of a school that has been closed for like 5 years. And no one was shot by it. It just went off like someone aimed and missed or whatever. And one was like
that's not a school shooting. That's a shot at a school.
Yeah,
in the premises of a school.
The criteria for school shooting is a gun was discharged within like 2 blocks of a school is apparently a school shooting. And it's like that really changes things because when I think school shooting, I think 17 kids died. Like
yeah. Well, you know what's really odd you bringing that up is actually just the other day somebody had mentioned that to me. I was like, did you know in 2018 there's already been 18 school shootings? And honestly, I hadn't heard that at that point in time. I didn't know. And I said, really? I didn't know that. Again, I'm totally comfortable telling people I'm not sure. But so the conversation, I had a small conversation. We didn't really get into anything about it because I work with the person. So I don't really get into this stuff with people I work with for obvious reasons. And so I was like, I just wasn't aware. And, we had a small conversation and I actually told them what I just mentioned here was that gun violence is actually going down. And I really kind of said it in a way that just made it like, oh, here's an interesting tidbit for you to know, like, do you know actually that gun violence is going down? Like I kind of put it like that, but, it's funny because this person who said this to me never mentioned what you just mentioned. They just went like red alert. Did you know there's 18 school shootings in 2018? There's just so many of them that CNN can't cover all of them. And it's like, I never heard that, so I didn't want to comment on it at the time. But it's like, yeah, people do that. They get this image in their head. They develop a story before knowing any of the facts.
Yeah, I'll post I found the article right here. It's from Reason.com. This wasn't where I got it from the first time. There's one that goes through every single one. But this one mentions 2 here, which I want to read quick. On January 10th, gunshots, which most likely originated off campus, hit a window of the Visual Arts Building at California State University, San Bernardino. That's one school shooting. On February 5th, in a suburb of Minneapolis, a school liaison officer was sitting on a bench talking with some students when a 3rd grader pressed the trigger on the officer's holstered weapon, causing it to fire and strike the floor. That's a second school shooting. That's not what you think when you think school shootings, but that's really like what the criteria is. It includes stuff like that.
I'm sorry, but that is not a school shooting. Because the term school shooting, those 2 words said right after each other in that order, brings a very specific, horrific situation in mind. And actually, I think it's despicable if people really are knowingly trying to cast that off into the lot of school shootings to try and get some narrative pushed. I think that's despicable, in fact. If somebody's really doing that, saying, oh, look, that's 18 school shootings, and really meanwhile a situation like that happened. That's underhanded to say the least.
Yeah, I try to in like every single place I can, like give people the benefit of the doubt and like assume ignorance and not malice. But when it comes to the school shooting thing, it's like, okay, you didn't look it up for one. Like, if I'm going to tell people there were a certain number of school shootings, I want to know what those are before I tell people about them. So they didn't look it up. Or if they did look it up, they thought that wasn't important. It's like, this is one of those cases where it's, anyone that says there was 18 school shootings, therefore we need to ban this or that kind of gun or guns in general, like, I know not to trust you right away.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know, maybe it's like a game of telephone. This happens locally and a local news story says like gunshot, school, and then a bigger conglomerate picks it up or something, and then people just don't really look into it and compile, and they come up with this 18 school shootings in a year. I don't know if that's how it happened. I would hope that's how it happened. I would hope that the people who put out those statistics, and certainly who've put out articles on the 18 school shootings in 2018 so far, I would hope they didn't know, because if they did know, if they were aware, then that's like I said before, it's despicable, and that's putting it lightly. That's really something that I would consider to be very disingenuous. But again, just to kind of like overarching theme, I think this is something that libertarians in general just deal with all the time, which is people just scratch the surface and then they act as if they've reached the core, right? I know everything there is to know about this one issue that I just scratched the surface. Whereas I like to think libertarians more really get to the core of things, and they actually understand more about what's actually going on, rather than reading the headline and then moving on and considering themselves to be an expert on the topic. And really, in a sense, we have to be, because I feel like libertarians have to be extremely well informed, because it's really, really easy to be a Republican or a Democrat. Because, like I said, all you have to do is read the headlines and you can just spout that and make your case. And you'll be a run-of-the-mill Republican or Democrat. But in order to be a libertarian, you've actually got to put in some effort and really study this stuff a little bit more deeply to be able to go against and sort of argue against the headline of the day, which is what, a lot of Democrats and Republicans want to spew at you. You need to be able to say, no, there's a little bit more to it than that. Because that's what I find myself very often saying whenever I'm arguing, again, mostly over the internet with people. It's like, no, you're scratching the surface here.
And it tends to be, there has to be a phrase for this, but I don't know what it is, or a term for this. But it seems like the more you look into something, like not even like just a specific event, but like a topic, like economics or something like that, or like a broad topic like that, where you'll look into it, you'll learn that you'll learn some stuff you didn't know. But then on top of that, you'll learn that there are things you didn't know that you didn't even know you didn't know, kind of thing. Like, you'll learn that there's actually much more to it. Like, you'll learn something, you'll think, okay, I learned something new, but I also learned that there are 8 things that I don't know about. Like, I learned their names, or that they exist, but I don't know anything about them. So it's like, the more you learn, the more you actually kind of realize that you don't know that much. Because every time you take in new information, you also realize that there's stuff you didn't know. And, like, I read a book... it's at the Mises Institute. I can't remember what it's called, but it's a book on Pearl Harbor. It's like 1,000 pages, and I read through that, and it's like, huh. So it's not even did I learn something new. I actually learned that there were some things that I thought I knew that were completely wrong. And it's like, I think the people that tend to stand back and say, I don't know, probably know more, if anything. Like, I tend to trust that they know more because they've been through that, where they know that, okay, there's more to it.
Yeah, there was a famous old quote, I forget who said it, but it was exactly that. It was like the educated person knows what they don't know. It was something along those lines. Whereas the uneducated person basically thinks that they know everything. It's like, if somebody thinks that they know everything, they probably don't know they probably don't know much at all.
Well, that was Socrates' first... it's not first rule, but it was like that was a Socrates quote of the first thing I know the first thing I know is that I know nothing. It's like, okay. That's a point.
All right, yeah, no, I think you're right. I do remember seeing Socrates' name after it. Yeah, which is good. And then it's sort of a weird thing, because as a libertarian, or just somebody in general who's willing to say I don't know, does that make me more intelligent than other people? Like, in being humble, am I being arrogant? Like, it's this weird sort of paradox thing. It's like, I don't know. You know what? They're like, for example, Barack Obama. I am sure that he knows more about the inner workings of, in fact, I 100% am positive he knows about the inner workings of the United States government far more than myself and any other person I've ever met. But does the fact that he thinks he knows how to run everybody's life, does that make him qualified to do that? No, I would say it wouldn't. It's this weird thing. It's just interesting to me, I guess.
Yeah, it's difficult though. Like, it is actually difficult because the people that are going around shouting that they have the answer are the ones that tend to not have the answer. So
Yeah.
it gives you that contradiction, or not contradiction, but you know what I mean, where like the people that you want to be the people that probably have the answers are the ones that tend to stand back and say no, or at the very least they need to take all this time to do their research before they say something. It's like, what is it? A lie can make its way halfway around the world before the truth has its shoes on, or something like that.
Yeah. But, it's funny because you just alluding to what you just said. Yeah, the person who says that they want to be in politics and have political power or whatever, that's the last person you would want in politics.
Exactly.
But the person who would never want to be in politics, that's who you would want to be in politics. But the weird thing is the moment that person would say, okay, I want to be in politics, is like, you're no longer qualified.
Yeah, it's just a fight you can't win.
Yeah, it's like, all right, I'm gonna campaign then. Well, then I won't vote for you.
Yeah, it's frustrating. It's like, and that's just the reality of the situation. It's like, I don't know if there's really anything you can do much about it other than just do your research and try to get it out there as much as possible. But it's just you're at a setback when the person you're against that is putting out false information. I mean, all they have to do is say something or read a quick article, and they're like, "Oh, I understand the world now. I understand that Ron Paul's a fascist." Well, you're still sitting back and saying, "Okay, well, I got 28 more books to read before I can have an opinion on this."
Yeah, and I mean, there is a point where you have to be reasonable in your own life. You can't become an absolute expert on everything to have an opinion. There's a gray area there. Just as we were talking about at the beginning of this, there's a gray area there. It's like, at least try and make an effort. That's all I can ask from people. Make an effort to research something before you start spewing off about it, because most people don't, and it shows.
Yeah, that is a good ending lesson for everyone, I think. A good way to combine everything together. That's exactly it. So, all right, so I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you very much, Libertarian Rants, for appearing on my channel. But where can people find you?
Well, I'm on Twitter. You can basically find me at @LibertarianRNT. It's kind of like Libertarian Rant without the A. That's me on Twitter. I'm on YouTube as well. Unfortunately, I have under 100 subscribers, still a small channel. I'm almost hitting it, and so therefore I don't have my own. You need to get 100 people, 100 subscribers in order to get your own like a little name for your channel. So if you just type into YouTube Libertarian Rants, I'm probably at the bottom of the first page or on the second page. I'm not quite sure. But regardless, if you go on my Twitter, again, Libertarian RNT, I link to my YouTube constantly on there.
Yeah, I've been going through his content for the last week or so, just going through one after another. They're really fantastic. I will say, when you search for his content, it's not Libertarian Socialist Rants, it's Libertarian Rants. He's number 2 on there, in my experience, from what I've found.
Yeah, I've looked for myself before, and I saw that, and I was like, I hope people don't get confused, because that's not me.
Yeah, no socialism here.
Nah, not into it.
All right, but just one more. Thank you very much for being on. You're welcome back whenever, and thanks to everyone for listening.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.